before having the speakers on stage, we're going to have a 5 minutes meditation session. Thank you very much.
Ripple out into the rest of your body. So feel your neck, your shoulders, all the way down your spine. Morning.
Yeah, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming this morning, and what a nice way to start. I feel grounded. So I thought about starting with introducing ourselves, because I noticed in the picture our name was on the other side. So I'm Nina, and this
Luana.
is Luana. And thank you for that presentation.
One and was very pregnant.
Very pregnant, apparently. Yes.
Very nice experience. Sorry.
Yeah.
We're three here on stage.
We're three on stage today. So yes, we will talk on the theme of thread, and we have divided this talk into 3 categories: the design, travel, and community, because that is what combines our journey together. And we thought we might just talk about our personal journeys and then try to make you reflect a little bit on your own one. Okay, so design. The thread as a foundation in a creative process. From empathy to problem solving, creativity weaves through every part of our lives, work, relationships, and decisions. So I like to start by talking about the word creative in Creative Mornings, creativity. Why we're all here today. So for me, creativity is fundamental. Usually we think about creativity as art or design, but for me it's more about being curious and connecting with people and, seeing new things in the world and how we approach the world. For me, creativity started when I was younger. This is me. So what I did was I had a mother that was, I lived only with her, and she had 2 jobs. So she worked in the day and the evenings, and I had to come with her. And as a child, you go with your parents to work and you're like, what am I gonna do here? So I started grabbing magazines that I could find, and I started cutting them, and I started getting different letters out and shapes and forms and just stitching them together, really. So as a child, this is where creativity started for me. And today, I use still the same impulse in my work. So I work as a user experience designer, where I look into what people want. So the first thing that I ask usually is, yes, thank you, is usually what do you need? So whether I work at the Swedish Police Authority, which I have, or FIFA, or I'm a part of a non-for-profit organization and do the work for them, I still try to combine this that I talked about earlier with creativity, to be curious, to approach the world in this way, to talk to different people and kind of stitch together the different pieces, which is what thread is for me. So this mindset has not only shaped my work, but also how I approach the world as a whole. So I've learned to trust the process, that, it's not always linear. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but still it takes you somewhere. And all these projects, they don't have anything combined really, except for that it's me combining them. So creativity is the thread that guides us. And for me, the creativity started as a child, and that was my journey. But for Luana, it was a little bit different.
So for me, it was about finding a red thread in my childhood. So my creative expression traces back to when I was little and was very encouraged by my family. And as you can see here, a photo of my grandfather. He's been kind of the first person to introduce me to a creative life. He was a photographer, and I spent a lot of time with him in the dark room and taking photos, but also as a subject. In my next photo, you'll see me at 1 year old. One of the few photos that he took when I was little. But then later on, when I was 7, I kind of started my own creative expression. So I started taking ballet classes for like 12 years. Which really, really shaped the way I was showing up, and being disciplined. And it taught me a lot of grace and a lot of it was really, really about being organized and being truthful to myself. But my creativity was also expressed through photography, design, painting as I grew up. And the different senses taught me how to see and feel the world differently. And you see this showing up into my work. As a designer, as an art director, I usually connect the dots and find the red thread. And that's like essential to my work. And then this never a linear process, really. You have to kind of rely on an insight or a creative idea when you come up with an advertising campaign. You can, whether it's like an advertising campaign or a social campaign or photography for a certain product, the thread is built one knot at a time, and it really shows up at the end in the final product, and it's mostly felt, so you kind of have a feeling of this process of the red thread. So really, as a conclusion, every choice that we take is a knot leading us down to a particular path.
Yeah. And so we've been sharing a little bit about our childhood, so let's move on a little bit to today. So one part that we both share is that we both have freelanced or are freelancers. And so for me, it started a few years ago when I wanted to start freelancing, and I thought it was really scary. And if anyone is thinking of that or like going down that path, I hope this will help you a little bit, because I thought about it for years. But I was like, will I find clients? Will I have enough money? How will that work? But I try to approach it in the same way as the creative part, just like being curious and thinking a little bit ahead and trying to connect these dots. So as a freelancer, you always have to think about the future. You can't really, like, this is one tip that I have. Maybe you don't have clients today, but maybe you can get them by doing a free talk or attending an event. You always have to think about that maybe you won't get the money today, but then it will lead to something in the future. So try to be curious about that. And just like the thread, freelancing isn't really linear. So some days when I worked, or some months even, I had too much to do. I didn't know what to do with myself. And some months, I didn't have anything to do. And I was like worrying about, will I have enough work? Will I have enough clients? But this is, I think, a part of life in general, just that it isn't always successful. And what you see, on social media and stuff, that everything goes really well. It goes sometimes down, sometimes up, and we learn so much from it. So even if I had times where I was like, oh, I don't really know how I'm gonna make enough money or how I'm gonna get that one client that I want, it's still a part of the process, and I learned a lot from it. And there were moments when I felt isolated as well, like not having a community while being freelancing. So that's something that I really wanted. But freelancing still gave me the opportunity to do what I want, when I wanted, with who I wanted, and start my day the way that I wanted it to be. So recently, I decided to shift my thread again and start working full-time and take on a role. But then my role currently has, now I'm getting the Swedish word in my head. But basically, it's fully remote. So I still get the freelancing part of being curious, creative, and working when I want and what time I want, but I still get the sense of community. So taking that leap into freelancing, it taught me so much, not just about my work, but also about myself. I learned that a thread doesn't always move in a certain direction, but sometimes it loops back, sometimes it gets stuck, like it gets in a ball. But with every step of the way, we're shaping something, we're creating something, we're making a choice. It's our own personal tapestry.
And this leads us to having that choice and the thread of choice. So the act of choosing which thread to follow in your life mirrors how you approach important life decisions. So for me, it's progressing into a freelance career, because I think that's also a common point that me and Nina have, at least after we have met, was a consequence of moving to 7 countries in the past 19 years, and really wanting to have that no bound to geographical location, choosing my work, the people that I spend my time with, the people that I get inspired, but also like the freedom of movement. If I wanted to move tomorrow to another country, I do have that structure set up for myself to take my work with me and not depend on, a bigger decisions. And I think this was really a dream, and that I didn't really think, I thought it was possible, but it was, everyone's kind of working through their own dreams as they progress in life. And I had to do things in parallel. I had to have a full-time job while I worked on the passion projects and the things that I really loved. And slowly I built that part of my life so I can take the leap on my own. And really taking that leap into freelancing taught me a lot, not just about my work, but also about myself. Here you can see some photos from the places that I lived and also traveled. And it also taught me the same way that Nina has mentioned, that a thread doesn't always move in the direction that we expect. Sometimes it loops back, sometimes it gets stuck. And yeah, when I moved, just to take a step back, when I moved from my country, from my small city in Transylvania to Gomurec, to Boston, New York, Brussels, Toronto, back to New York, Singapore, and then to Gothenburg, I was required to rethink old patterns and readapt to the situations that I was put in. So I needed to entangle those preconceived notions that I had about myself, but also about the places that I was moving into, and really fit into a new cultural context. And I think if you have moved, or even if you have traveled, you probably have felt that already. And this can be both difficult and liberating, but it has also been my biggest source of inspiration in my work. So it's also a process of ongoing design, really moving. Every action that you take, it kind of adds to that unique fabric of your life, and each knot kind of helps you create that new version of yourself. And then we'd like to take a moment to pause and reflect, because we've been speaking a lot, and of course it's also about what you take away from this.
Yeah.
And really, you have a note on your seat, but you can also write it in your phone if you'd like. Looking at your own life, what choices do you want to make to create a thread in a particular direction? How have these choices shaped who you are today, and how do you want to change that in the future? So you can take a moment to write that down and keep that for yourself for the future from today's talk.
Hmm? Okay, so sorry about interrupting some of you. We can continue that later. Yeah, it was very, wow. So the next thing or theme that we would like to discuss is travel, which we have talked about a little bit already. So the golden thread. Travel and exploration are not just about places, they're about discovering ourselves and our guiding forces. So these are two pictures of me in Melbourne, which is in Australia, which is a place I moved to in 2013. And I stayed there for about 5 or 6 years. So when I moved there, which I share with Luana that I lived in another place, at least one, but not as many. I just left everything familiar behind. I packed up my life. Maybe some of you know about it and have done the same thing. Just, leaving your home and your family and your friends, really. But I was so excited, and I used this notion of creativity, of being curious. And I left for a design job at a design studio, but it wasn't only a job. I wanted to explore and for the travel to be a part of design for me. So Melbourne was a vibrant city, and I just wanted the design to flow freely and the creativity, really. So every interaction, every corner of the city seemed to contribute to something new as to my perspective as a designer. But moving wasn't easy. As you uproot yourself, the thread becomes fragile. So you worry it might break. It was a long distance. There was a lot of unknowns, and also starting from scratch, it's a bit scary. It felt overwhelming. But what I realized is that with every challenge that we get stronger. And I made a particular choice that I wanted to move, and so therefore all these opportunities came up for me. That's why we wanted you to reflect, because when we make this choice, we can change this thread. So it made me more resilient, and one thing that I thought was really interesting is then when I moved back to Sweden in 2018-19, it was harder than actually moving to Melbourne because Sweden had changed, and so had I. But what I did was that I joined different communities. As you can see here, it's a community called Dadashi that I was a part of, and also CreativeMornings. So the first thing I did actually was to, next one. Thank you. Yeah, thank you. So moving back to Sweden was even scarier, I thought. So Sweden had changed, and so had I. But also, you know, our Swedes were like, or Swedish people are famous for being quiet, and they don't want to hang out with anyone. And so I was really scared of this because I came from Melbourne. Everyone was vibrant, talking to each other on the tram. You know, that doesn't happen here. So I was really scared of this. But it was a leap of faith, and I did reconnect. So just as I started this choice by moving to Melbourne and trying to connect to people, this also happened when I came to Sweden by attending these events. So travel taught me whether the thread feels strong or fragile, it's always there pulling us forward. Yeah, thank you. So each challenge in the unknown strengthens the connections between our past, present, and future.
And this leads us to the thread that keeps it all together, CreativeMornings, and the reason why everyone is here today, but also the reason why both of us are on stage today together, because we've met as a product of CreativeMornings. Through all my moves, I'd say that CreativeMornings was a really, really strong anchor. It really helped me find a community, it really helped me find friendships, and it really like fought that loneliness of like when you take a leap of move or when you travel. So I remember I started as a volunteer for CreativeMornings just because I was afraid that if I didn't volunteer, I would never show up because I'm not a morning person. So I had to have someone hold me accountable, which is this volunteering contract that I had with the organization to make sure that I make it, because I knew it was going to benefit me in the future. So I realized it was a part of being part of a global movement, and being part of that community was really going to pay off in the future for me, but also in the present. So my first volunteering experience was in Toronto, then it was in New York, and then in Singapore I became a host, so I kind of changed things up. I started volunteering as a photographer, but slowly I wanted to get involved in the organization part of it, in the marketing part of it, but also just like meeting people from different kind of points of view, you know, meeting a speaker, helping them be on stage today the way we are today here, and really changing it up and also growing with them. So in circumstances of the move, travel, and starting a new job, this community really helped me weave my story professionally, but also personally. And also as a solo entrepreneur, it provided access to other people, their skills, you know, people that you can connect with any level and learn from at 8 a.m. in the morning. So this takes us to kind of a web of interconnected threads, you know, the community as a bigger aspect, not just as CreativeMornings.
Yeah. So community transform fragile threads into resilience and supportive tapestries, what we want you to take away from this. So we've been talking a lot about ourselves, so I thought I might share some facts as well. There are some studies that show that people who feel connected to their community report higher levels of happiness and well-being, as well as reduced feelings of loneliness and increased overall life satisfaction. So what does this tell us? Well, for me, this was very true. Like when I joined a community, I felt a lot happier, and I felt like I was connected to something bigger than myself. And when I moved to Melbourne, finding a community was really important to me because I was all alone. I didn't know anyone. So also attending the CreativeMornings events, this is a picture of me there with short hair, was really important. Also here, I think it's funny because I noticed that the only people that would ask questions at CreativeMornings events at the end were Americans. So I thought that me as a Swede, one time I'm going to stand up and ask a question, because these events were quite big there. And I did, and I changed the statistics. Yeah, so not even the Australians wanted to do it. But then when I moved back to Gothenburg, as I shared, I was still, you can go back. I was still holding on to that thread. But this time, instead of just joining, I decided to host. So this is me hosting, and also the first Creative Mornings event that we had after the pandemic is the one on your right. So it wasn't just about organizing events or getting the coffee or that stuff when I was hosting. It was about weaving a community together, and I wanted others to feel the same sense of belonging that I did when I moved to Melbourne. And also the events had been off for 2 years during the pandemic, so I wasn't the one that brought Creative Mornings to Gothenburg, someone else did. But I, just like Claudia, brought it back when it had been resting for a while. So there's a fun coincidence that ties my story to Luana's, and that is before we met, we both attended a Creative Mornings event on the same day in 2015 in August, but in different parts of the world. So she did in New York, and I attended one in Melbourne. So even though we didn't know each other, our threads were kind of connecting already. But for us, it wasn't just about attending or hosting. We both wanted to build something deeper, a space for connection, creativity, and collaboration. So the statistics that I shared, or the studies, they reflect what I have experienced. Being a part of a community has reduced my feelings of being lonely, but also it has built resilience, and talking to other people that are going through the same thing has made me realize that it's a part of the journey. The journey is not like this, So whether it's through Creative Mornings or your friends or some other organization that you're a part of, community strengthens the thread of our lives. So ultimately, life is a tapestry made out of people, places, and choices that we encounter.
So what started as a conversation between two Creative Morning hosts when Nina moved back from Melbourne and I moved from Singapore to Gothenburg, it quickly revealed that our lives were full of similar threads. We had both lived abroad, we traveled extensively, but also we built our careers in design. So we had a lot to talk about and a lot to unpack, and also a lot to help each other grow in the future. And beyond our work, we both shared the belief that life is deeply interconnected, that the people that we meet and the experiences that we have often weave in ways that we don't really see clearly at the time, but we see it in the future. So it felt like our threads meant to cross, and when they did, they began to intertwine into a friendship and a collaboration that has brought us much richness in both of our lives. Now we share a studio here in Majorna. That was another one on our to-do list, a little dream as freelancers, so we made that happen, which is great. We'll share the details so you can come visit us. But until then, we really wanted to leave you with a quote at the end of our talk. While you reflect on your thread and on your own journey. This is a quote from Anais Nin on the complexity of growth. We do not grow absolutely chronologically. We grow sometimes in one dimension and not in another, unevenly. We grow partially, we are relative, we are mature in one realm, childish in another. The past, present, and future mingle and pull us backward, forward, or fix us in a present, just like a thread. We are made up of layers, cells, and constellations. So thank you for today's talk and for being here.
Yeah.